All right, we're ready to start P2. Here we go. This is all vocabulary. I think you probably know all this already. What do we call this line right here? That's your x-axis. What do we call this one right here? That's your y-axis, right? What do we call this point right here? Origin. It's called the origin. Because that's where we start, right? That when we're going to start counting, plotting points, this is where you start. Count left, right, up, down, whatever. That's where you start, the origin. These four things right here are called quadrants. How are the quadrants numbered? Which one is this?
3.
That's quadrant 3. And this is 4, and this is 1, and this is 2, right? So since people often refer to, they'll say, oh, I have a point in quadrant 3. You need to know where that is. That's down here, quadrant 3. Anybody know what this whole thing is called? This is called what? Anybody know what we call that?
Graph.
Well, it certainly is. It's a coordinate plane. It's actually specifically called the Cartesian coordinate plane. One exciting thing that we'll do this year is we will start graphing not only in the rectangular coordinate plane, but we'll also start graphing on a circular plane. And that's called the polar coordinate system. So we'll be doing that later. This is called the Cartesian coordinate plane. This is your rectangular. Everything is X and Y, horizontal and vertical. Anybody have an idea what we mean by this notation right here? We've been given a couple of points, a couple of ordered pairs. Does anyone know what that stands for?
Line.
Andrew? Well, it has to do with the line from A to B. Actually, it has to do with the segment from A to B, but it's actually the distance. This is actually the distance from A to B. So you are being asked for a number. This is just going to be a number, like 10 or the square root of 17. That's just going to be a number. Who remembers how to find the distance between 2 points?
Is it the square root of x2 minus x1 over y?
Not over. Just it's one big long line. So the formula is this. Jalen, you're right. But nobody is ever going to ask you for the formula. Nobody is ever going to do that. They just want you to be able to do the problem. So basically what you need to be able to do is subtract your x's. And the order's irrelevant. Just subtract them. So if I do -1 minus 7 and square that, then I subtract my y's, 3 minus 1, square that, add those together and take the square root. So I don't care if you use a formula or don't use a formula. You subtract the x's, square them. Subtract the y's, square them. Add them up and take the square root. So, what's -1 minus 7? -8. Squared?
64.
64. Remember, when you square, it's always going to be positive. If you're dealing with real numbers, when you square it, it's always going to be positive. Oh shoot, did I remember to turn this back on? Did I? Okay, good. All right. 3 minus 1 is
2.
squared.
4.
So I'm going to add 64 and 4. I'm going to get the square root of 68. Now this is one of those math technicalities. Square root of 68 is a fine number, but that radical can actually be reduced, and we should reduce it. So the square root of 68. Anybody remember how to reduce radicals? We take out whatever perfect squares we can. So you might just start by breaking this down and say, okay, that's 2 times 34 and 34 is 2 times 17, and that's it, right? Anything you have 2 of
Put it on the outside.
comes out, because basically that's a 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. So out comes a 2, and the 17 stays inside. Okay? That's the answer. All right, how about the next one? Well, the good news is they're all done exactly the same way. The answers are going to be different, of course, but every single distance formula is done the same way. So let's go through this one together, and then I'll have you try a couple on your own. Here we go. AB means the distance from A to B. The distance is a big giant radical, and underneath the radical we're going to subtract our x's, so 2 minus negative 5 and 6 minus 1. So we're going to subtract our x's, square them, subtract our y's, square them, add them up, and take the square root. So what's 2 minus negative 5?
I'll take 7.
7 squared is 49. 6 minus 1, 5 squared, 25. Add them up, 29 or 49 and 25. What is that? 74.
Yeah.
And 74, I think, is 2 times 37. So guess what? That one doesn't break down. So we're good with the square root of 74. All right, would you try C on your own and compare your answer with your neighbor?
I don't know if we do our notes in pen, so we can see the difference.
You see on your own, compare your answer with your neighbor. I got the square root of 13. Did I do it right?
Yes.
Anybody have an issue? Question? Everybody okay? All right. Now we're going to do midpoint. So we got a couple of points, just like before. Obviously, we could draw a line segment from here to here, right? And we want to know, okay, what would be the midpoint of that line segment? Anybody remember how to do that? Midpoint. Magnus.
Distance half.
Well, that would be half the distance. That we could probably find the midpoint from that. But I want you to think about this, Magnus. Let's say you took a test and you got an 80 on the test. And then you took another test and you got a 60. And then I had to put a grade on your report card. What would I do? Wouldn't I want to find the middle value of the 60 and the 80? So what would I do? How do I find that middle value?
Add them up.
Add them up and divide by 2. We call that
Average.
averaging. Boys and girls, midpoint is nothing but the average. So when I look at these 2 points, I want to find the average x, the middle value. That's the average. What's in the middle of 60 and 80?
Oh.
What is the middle value for the x's? Well, average. -1 plus 6 is 5 divided by 2 is 5/2 or 2.5. I don't care if you use decimals or fractions. 5/2 or 2.5. Midpoint is average. That's it. We all know how to average. That's all we're doing. So we're going to find the average x. Now we're going to find the average y. So 2 and 4 is 6. Divided by 2 is 3. So your midpoint is 5/2, 3. You find the average x and the average y, and that is your midpoint. That's the point that's right in the middle. If we plotted these two, that point would be right in the middle of them. All right, so go ahead and do B. Find the average x and y for problem B. Add the x's, divide by 2. Add the y's, divide by 2. You may leave them as decimals or fractions, whichever you're more comfortable with. This is what I got. You okay with that?
Yep.
All right, number 4. It says find the center and the radius. What do you think this is then? This is not a line segment. If they're saying find the center and the radius, what is this? It's a circle. This is the equation of a circle. You've seen them before. This is a circle. Anybody have any recollection of what the center and the radius might be for this guy?
Oh, isn't the radius wouldn't the radius be 4 because it's 60?
The radius is the square root of this number.
Yeah.
So if you square root that number, that gives you your radius. So for this circle, the radius is 4. The center is actually the origin. Now, if you can't remember this, that's going to be a little bit confusing until we look at the next problem. When we look at the next one, this is a circle. This equation has the same format as this one. It's x squared and y squared equals a number. But you see how there's extra stuff in there now? That means the center is not at the origin anymore. If you haven't added or subtracted anything from your x's, then you're at the origin. That's the beginning point. If you start adding and subtracting to the x's and y's, you're moving your center. Anybody want to take a guess where this center is? 2, -3. Very, very good. Notice that it's the opposite. So when we did x minus 2, the center is actually at 2. And when we did y plus 3, the center is actually at -3. And what's our radius? Square root of 15. So the center of this circle is at +2, -3, and the radius is the square root of 15. This one, the center was at 0, 0 because you don't have anything added or subtracted here. You don't have these parentheses. Okay? So if we had one like this isn't on your sheet, but where do you think the center of this one would be?
0,
At 0, 2, +2, 0, 2 would be your center. Remember, it's the opposite of the parentheses. So 0, 2. And what would my radius be? Square root of 10. Your radius is always the square root of that number, that equals number. Now, number 5, we're going to see if you paid attention there, because now number 5, you're writing your own equation. Sorry to keep you awake. So we got a center and a radius given, and we're going to write the equation of the circle So we're gonna come up with an equation that looks like this. That's what you want your equation to look like, okay? So anybody have a thought on that? Rita?
X minus 1 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 36.
Alright, let's take a minute, digest that. What do you think, kids? Is she right?
Yep.
Is that what you got? Remember, the parentheses have the opposite. So that's a positive 1 and a positive 4. So this is going to be x minus 1, y minus 4. And then this is always the radius squared. Remember how we took the square root of it to get the radius? That means when you go the other way, you're going to have to square it to get the equation number. Perfect. Try B on your own. Can you do B?
Yep.
See if you can write your equation. This is what I got. Is there anybody that's got an issue with that?
Does x plus 3 always need to go first, or can you go
It wouldn't technically have to because addition is commutative, but we always do. We always have x's first. All right, now we're ready for a pre-calculus problem. You're thinking, oh, this isn't so bad. Nope, it wasn't till now. Take a look at this. Because this is going to ask you to put together everything we talked about today. All right, so here's the deal. We have a circle, and it has a diameter. Now, does everybody remember what a diameter is?
Yeah, one
Radius.
side of the
A
circle.
diameter goes through the center, right? It's a chord that goes through the center. That's a diameter. 2 radii. And the end points are at -1, 5, and 3, 7. And you are going to write the equation of the circle. So you need to come up with this.
You need the distance, right?
And that's all we have. Goggins, is your hand up in the air? Do you want to volunteer an idea? Come on. No idea? All right, let's stop a minute. Just a second, Jalen. Let's stop a second. This was easy. You all did this problem. You all just wrote the equation of a circle. What information did we have to make this happen? What did we need to know? We needed to know the center, and we needed to know the radius. So if we're going to write the equation, somehow we have to figure out what the center is, and somehow we have to figure out what the radius is.
Oh, God.
Now, wait a minute. What do we know about the center and its relationship to these 2 points? It's in the middle,
Midpoint.
right? It's the midpoint. And to find midpoint, we average. So what is my average x value? -1 plus 3
2.
divided by 2.
1.
So my middle x is 1.
Oh, yeah.
5 and 7 divided by 2.
6.
So there is my midpoint, which means that the equation of my circle is this so far, right?
Wait,
Yes.
So far. Not done, but so far.
would the first part of the midpoint, the x, would it not be -1?
-1 plus 3
Oh my gosh, wait, no, I'm so dumb.
is 2. Divided by 2 is 1.
Yep.
Now I need my radius. Jalen?
Could you do the distance for me and square root it?
And square it. Yep. I'm going to find the distance Now, I'm gonna find this distance, because there aren't any negative numbers. Could I also find this distance?
Of course.
It makes no difference, you just pick one, whatever you wanna do it. So the radius is going to be the square root of, remember how the distance formula works? 1 minus 3 squared, 6 minus 7 squared. I'm doing my distance formula. So 1 minus 3
-2.
squared.
4.
6 minus 7 squared.
-1.
So my radius is the square root of 5?
Yes.
But then, no, it's actually 5.
So it's actually 5 when I write the equation, because remember, this number is r squared. You have x squared, y squared, r squared. So if the radius is root 5, the square root of 5, then r squared would be just plain 5.
Oh god, how did I do that?
This is called the distance formula. That's called the distance formula. We're using the distance formula.
Oh.
Alright, we got a couple more to do, and then we'll do a little more practice here. We're going to evaluate. What do these, I'm looking at number 6 now. What do these vertical bars
Absolute
mean?
value.
Absolute value. And whatever happens, if you take the absolute value of something, it will be positive. But before you take the absolute value, you have to do the stuff inside. So we're going to do -3 plus 2. -1. But taking the absolute value, it would be 1. So the answer to A is 1, because you have to do what's inside first. Alright, so B, same thing. We're going to do each absolute value separately. So what do we get in the first absolute value?
-3.
We get -3, but of course we're taking absolute value, so it's going to be 3. So the first one is 3. And then we have minus this. Alright, what's inside the second absolute value? 4.
Yes.
And the absolute value of 4 is 4. So 3 minus 4 is
-1.
-1. What did I see? Very good. Whoever said 0 is right. What happens sometimes is, sometimes when we see a double negative like that, we want to cancel them. You can't. You've got to, absolute value of 5 is 5. Absolute value of -5 is 5. You have to evaluate the absolute values and then deal with the subtraction. So forget about this, figure out what that is, it's 5. Figure out what this is, it's 5. So the answer is 0. Good. Very good. Figure out that last one, tell me what the answer is.
14.
Everybody got 14 already? 7 plus 7, 14? Perfect. Alright. I'm going to do one more of these diameter problems, and then we'll move on to P3. So I don't know where you're going to do this. Squeeze it in somewhere on a separate sheet of paper or along the margin or something. But we're going to write the equation of the circle with diameter endpoints, -2, 4, and -6, 10. Alright? So again, here's the situation. We have a circle, and the endpoints of a diameter, this is an extra problem I'm just doing for practice. because this is a guaranteed test question. We're gonna make sure we review this a little bit, solidify it. Here's just a picture of the scenario. And our job is to write the equation of the circle. So the first thing we need to do, or some order doesn't really matter, but one thing we need to do is find the middle point. And to find the middle point, we find the average. Middle is average. And so we average our x's. -2 plus -6. -8. Divided by 2, -4. So your middle x is -4. Now what about y? We have 4 and 10. So half of that would be 7. Now some of you have this glazed look on your face. Average, middle point, average. Add the x's and divide by 2. Add the y's, divide by 2. That is your center. So when you build your equation, it's going to be x plus 4 squared plus y minus 7 squared equal to something. Now, the something is going to be the radius squared. So now we need to find the radius. Okay. Everything's got negative, so it doesn't matter. I guess I'll just find this again. Is that all right? Doesn't really matter. You can find either side. So to find my radius, I need my distance formula, which is the big radical thing. So -4 minus -6 plus 7 minus 10. And don't forget those are squared. So I subtract my x's, subtract my y's. So I end up with, that's going to be 2 squared 4. And 9. So my radius is the square root of 13.
It says 13.
Which means in the equation it's just going to be 13. That is not a hard problem, but there are several steps, right, that we have to go through. All right, here we go. Number 2.
Wait, did we not hear the one?
Or yeah, number 1. It has a 2.
Yeah. It just starts
And I prefer not to think of it as grinding. I don't think it's grinding. I think we're having fun. All right, so here we go. Question number 1 says, I have this handy-dandy little quadratic equation, and I want to know, is -2 a solution? This is a yes or no question. You got options. You always have options. Who can think of one way? Plug in -2?
Yeah.
If you plug in -2 for all of the x's, if it's a solution, it'll give you 0, right? So let's see. What's -2 squared?
4.
4. What's -4 times -2? 8. Oh, I think it is. Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Anybody do that problem a different way? You're the one that told me to plug in -2. Okay, what's another way?
Factor.
Solve that equation. And he said factor it. You could also use the quadratic formula. You could also complete the square, whatever you remember how to do. But that one does factor. Let's see, factors of 12, so that'd be what, 6 and 2? So the roots are 6 and -2, so is it a solution? Yes, it is. So that's another option. Of course, to do that, you gotta remember how to solve a quadratic. All right, the next part, little vocabulary. Which are linear equations? Now, let's make sure we understand what we mean by linear equations. We mean that the highest power of the variable is x to the first. This is called a quadratic equation because it has x squared. We just need plain x's. So, is A linear equation? Yes. Is B? No, because B doesn't have an x to the first, it has x to the 1/2. Remember, radicals are fractional exponents. We don't want any radicals. We don't want any exponents other than 1. So B is a no. C is a no. Can't have variables in the denominator and be linear. D, no. Can't have squares in the denominator anywhere, no. E,
Yes.
yes. E is a yes. And F, no. It has a square, that makes it quadratic. So the only two in that entire list are A and E. All the rest of them have something wrong with them. B has a radical. C has a fraction with an x in the denominator. D has a fraction with an x squared in the denominator. And F has an x squared. All right, solve 3A for me. You can do this. I know you can do this. Solve 3A. Tell me the answer.
Oh.
For those of you that have forgotten, you're going to add 9 and divide by 2. So if you add 9 and divide by 2,
6.
you get t equals 6. B. Now B is a little more complicated because we've got x's on both sides. But I have confidence in you. How do you solve this?
It's 2.
You move all the x's to one side. Now, it doesn't matter which side, right? So you do whatever flips your switch. I'm going to go ahead and add 2x to both sides. So 4 equals 5x minus 6.
Yep.
6.
Now we'll add the 6 to both sides. And multiply by 5. Now, I am showing all my work in every single step. We are seniors. Some of us are going to do a lot of that in our heads. It isn't a problem for me at all. I just showed every single step. So x equals 2. What about C? This one is a little bit freaky because it has fractions. And sometimes we don't deal very well with fractions. So if I called on you and said, fix this for me, what would you do? Multiply by
5. By 3
okay. The quickest way to do it is to multiply by 3/2. Because what happens when you multiply 3/2 times 2/3? What happens to all that? It's gone. And that leaves you with just x, which is your goal, right?
Yep.
Now, how do we multiply fractions? Straight across. So if you just go straight across, that's going to be 12 over 10. Straight across is how we multiply fractions. But 12 over 10 does reduce. So that would be 6/5. Now, a few of you might choose to reduce before you multiply. And that's okay too. We call it cross canceling. So you might say over here, oh look, 2 goes into 4. If you don't do that, forget it. You don't have to do it this way, but some of you might. and then you end up with 6/5 and you reduce before you multiply. Now, I want to go back to the original problem because that's the fastest way to do the problem. Hands down, that's the way to do it. But sometimes we get confused. So you can do it in 2 steps. You can multiply both sides by 3, and that would leave you with this. And then you can multiply both sides by 1/2. And you see how we're going to end up with the same answer? It just took us a little longer, but you can always deal with it in 2 steps if all at once is too much for you. Speaking of too much, look at D. What a disaster. Any question about this? Any ideas about this? Subtract 1/4? We absolutely could do that. You know what though? I'd rather just multiply the whole shebang by 12. Because if I subtract 1/4, I'm going to have to get a common denominator, right?
Yep.
And then I still have a 1/3 to deal with. I think I'm going to multiply everything by 12. Now, it takes a second, but if I do that, can you see what's going to happen? What's 12/3? So that's just 4x. What's 12/4?
3.
And now I have a problem that I can pretty much do in my head. I don't need to worry about the fractions. I just got rid of them. They're gone. So 4x equals 9 and x equals 9/4. Those of you that do the problem by subtracting a 4th, that is absolutely fine. So you have 1/3 x, I'm going to subtract a 4th, equal to 3/4. Then I'll multiply both sides by 3/1. And lo and behold, what am I going to get? 9/4. I'm going to get exactly the same answer. So you're going to do whatever method you feel comfortable doing. All right, if you want to come in and work on homework during flex, I'll be here.